Great, let's go ahead and get started. This is HK from the third sector team coming to you from a very snowy Boston today. I want to thank you all for joining the Paper Success in Higher Education National Cohort final convening and celebration. A big thank you to all of you, our state and system partners, as well as our provider advisory group for coming along this journey for the last 6 months. And also want to extend a thank you to the Kresge Foundation for supporting this work. Finally, also want to thank the third sector team who has worked on this project and come along the journey along the way: Sarah, John, Alicia, Joanna, and Emma. A few quick reminders before we dive in. This is being recorded, and please keep yourselves on mute until we get to the point where you can jump in with Q&A. So today we'll hear from our state and system partners on their progress to date, their next steps, and the lessons that they've learned along the way. Our guest, Roger Lowe, will share some exciting updates from the broader paper success field, and Sarah will preview early findings from our landscape work with providers and funders. Here's the agenda that we'll follow, and we'll be sure to hold state and system partners to their 15-minute time limits to ensure that everyone can share their story, as well as that they can take questions from the group. So during that time, feel free to use the chat box to drop in questions, as well as to unmute yourself to ask questions. Before we dive in, I want to remind everyone where we came from and what we set out to do. So together, we sought to improve matriculation, persistence, and graduation outcomes for low-income, first-generation, and/or students of color by building partnerships between systems of higher education and college access and success providers. And we sought to use paper success financing as a way to bridge funding challenges with upfront working capital, as well as outcomes payments that are contingent upon results. So all of you have been active and enthusiastic participants on this journey, and we're so grateful for the ability to adapt and explore this model across geographies and across different types of services with you. Additionally, we're grateful for the opportunity to bring you all together at NCAN, as well as virtually, for you to continue sharing with and learning from each other. So as a result of our time together, each state and system has workshopped how paper success financing may be leveraged to systematically fund evidence-based student support services that improve student outcomes to and through college. And over the course of our time together, the state and system partners have really customized and workshopped this illustrative paper success model to meet the needs of their specific contexts and their priority student populations, as well as to really address the root causes of the outcomes disparities that they identified. As a result of this process, the state and system partners now have a vetted project hypothesis for a potential paper success project, as well as a roadmap of next steps, some of which they'll be sharing with you. In addition, the state and systems, as well as the providers, have multiple tools that really enable and support the creation of paper success projects. And providers will be receiving a readiness assessment and some recommendations for next steps that they could follow in order to engage in paper success projects. Overall, I would say that the field has a greater sense of how to apply paper success in higher education in pursuit of access and success outcomes, largely thanks to the input from all three stakeholder groups who we worked with: the state and systems, the providers, as well as the funders. We have been truly impressed with your ongoing dedication and commitment to the cohort, and we can share from past cohort experiences that we don't always have a group that really sticks with it and truly makes the experience their own. In particular, we want to celebrate three things. One, the fact that you really reached across silos to engage new agencies, providers, and community members as collaborators in building towards these projects. Two, we appreciate your willingness to trust the process, and in some cases to repeat the process multiple times with multiple stakeholders, really in pursuit of identifying that specific population that you wanted to hone in on, or a deeper root cause that would help you get closer to addressing the challenges that those students were facing. And then finally, want to celebrate your real commitment to equity in continually centering underserved student populations that have been experiencing disproportionately negative outcomes and truly building projects around serving those students. So with those reflections, and before we turn it over to our state and system partners to share where they've landed, I'm thrilled to turn it over to Roger Lowe, the Policy Director at America Forward, to offer some remarks on how your work is informing a larger Pay for Success movement. Roger has experience with Pay for Success at both the implementer level, previously launching projects in Colorado, as well as at the policy level, working with the senator in Colorado and now at America Forward. He's really championed the evolution of this model and is a great resource towards all of us who seek to use Pay for Success. So Roger, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah and HK. And can you still hear me okay, hopefully?
We can.
Great. Well, I'll try to be brief here because I've got a packed call agenda, and I'm looking forward to sticking on and hearing the updates from the state, if that's okay. So as briefly mentioned, as you can see from the slide, I'm currently with America Forward, which is a coalition of nonprofits and social entrepreneurs across the country working on early childhood, K through 12, higher ed, workforce, and Pay for Success with a cross-cutting focus on equity, evidence, and improving measurable outcomes. And before that, I worked some both in state government in Colorado and on the Hill. So at America Forward, we're very focused on the current state of the Pay for Success field, where this work is going, with third sector obviously being one of the leading thinkers, doers, and innovators in this space in the entire country. And in conversations with Sarah and many others at third sector, we've been following this higher ed cohort with great interest. And I think this is a really important group of states and providers that third sector has brought together in the field. So we're currently engaged, focused primarily in DC, but also thinking about, at the state and local level increasingly, where the Pay for Success field is and how we can push it forward to make, the billions and billions of dollars we spend at all levels of government more outcome oriented. So that's a big cross-cutting theme for us. Sarah, HK, if you want to go to the next slide, great. So I'll keep this real brief. One specific effort that some of you may have heard something about or a lot about, but is worth sharing, is the Fund for Innovation and Success in Higher Education Act, the Finish Act, which at this point has bipartisan champions and has been introduced in both chambers of Congress. You can see there who those champions are in both the Republican and Democratic side in the third bullet. It's an important first step to introduce Pay for Success and to try to build evidence in the higher education field. Over the last 7 years or so, America Forward, working a lot with third sector and others, has successfully cracked the door open to Pay for Success in a number of areas. That includes the Social Impact Pay for Results Act, which is the first ever federal outcomes fund, which is housed at the Treasury Department. That includes by authorizing Pay for Performance in the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, which is federal workforce legislation, in the Career and Technical Education reauthorization that was passed just last year. So there are, in ESSA in particular, in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So there are some places where Pay for Success exists, but as you all know, darn few. At this point, we can say that over $1 billion annually in federal spending is eligible for Pay for Success, but that's still a drop in the bucket relative to the over $1 trillion that we spend on social services every year. In fact, by what one frequently cited measurement, well under 1% of all federal spending is tied to an outcome or rigorously evaluated or spent on a service that has been rigorously evaluated. So the Finish Act is an effort to crack the door open to that in higher education. It creates a new tiered evidence fund for the first time that would create a new funding stream to rigorously evaluate interventions for the first time in the higher ed space, and to then replicate them so that, once you have a really rigorously evaluated intervention, you can then scale it out and prove that it works again in other jurisdictions. It also authorizes up to 5 pay for success pilot programs, subject to the secretary authorizing them, in the higher ed space. So we're thrilled that that's been introduced. We frankly still have a long way to go before it can actually be enacted. We've been tracking the congressional activity. The Higher Education Act was just marked up and reported out in the Democratic-controlled House just a month or so ago. Not a ton of progress on actually getting the Finish Act provisions in yet, but we are hoping, that there's a long road to go here. There will be a Senate process. We frankly don't think that there will be a big bipartisan Higher Education Act this Congress. We think it's probably going to get punted to the next Congress that starts in 2021. And we continue to think that the outcomes and pay for success work that we're doing is really ripe for bipartisan action. So we're hoping to see more of that move in 2021 and beyond, and we're continuing to try to lay the groundwork for that to happen. You want to go ahead and one more slide to talk more broadly. Beyond the Higher Education Act, one of the been working a lot with the third sector team and others in our coalition around what the future of pay for success looks like. If it's of interest, some of you may have already seen it. I think it was sent around to this list. Caroline Whistler, the CEO and co-founder of Third Sector, and I, as well as our colleague Sindhu at Living Cities, recently wrote a piece for the Stanford Social Innovation Review that lays all this out in a little bit more wonky detail, if that's of interest to anyone. We see the pay for success field is evolving very rapidly. One of the things that I'm sure you're all aware is pay for success is often synonymous with pay for success financing or social impact bonds. We think that's one important approach, one tool that can be deployed in a variety of ways, but it's really just one facet of what we think of as the current and evolving pay for success field, which includes tying public sector dollars to outcomes, building evidence, building and improving integrated data, doing active performance management, tying active performance management, good management of data, and dollars tied to outcomes to a procurement process. And a social impact bond or PFS financing is just one of many different ways to drive that work forward. This is like anything, an imperfect framework, but we've been talking about this is sort of 4 S's, 4 S domains, and you can see what they are here. Systems is really about whether it's in the Higher Education Act or in the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, which has already been passed, or in any number of other federal domains, authorizing pay for success and allowing state governments, local governments, and providers to actually tie dollars to outcomes. And that effectively involves rewiring the way that government funding flows, because as you know, for the most part, government pays for inputs or outputs, not outcomes. We also, we think that this can't just be about sort of creating new authorities and legislation. We also want to actively partner with state officials, governors, local officials around the country to launch the next generation of outcome-based projects. And Third Sector, again, is at the front lines of that, as are all of you. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about your shared reflections on the field, working with Third Sector over the last several months. But we really, in order to move the needle on DC, it really is vital that we see more outcome-based projects where dollars are tied to outcomes, where we're really funding approaches that are moving the needle on the key outcomes that the communities care about, so that we can make a stronger case to the folks here in DC that this is something that state and local governments want to do more of, and that will help grow and scale the most effective services that providers are offering. So we're hoping in 2020 and beyond that we will see sort of a new wave of projects. And one piece of that is the finalists recently recommended by CIPRA, the new outcomes fund at Treasury. There's 8 projects from South Carolina to Oklahoma to California to Alaska and several others that were recommended as finalists. So we think that's one piece of sort of the next generation of Pay for Success. We frankly also think that the higher ed field is a really, really important and fruitful area where we'd like to see more PFS and outcome-based projects. The final S's are support, this idea of staff, better data systems, better TA technical assistance from folks around the country that like third sector, that are developing a specialty for advising and supporting governments at making their work more outcome oriented. We can do all the systems change work we want, and we can try to launch projects, but unless we actually seed and fund an outcomes infrastructure, one of the things we've really seen over the last decade is we're not going to get that far. And finally, as important as the first 3 domains are, unless we're doing this in a really thoughtful, strategic way that transcends traditional sectors, right? That focuses on governance structures that engage communities, that engage nonprofits, and that really listen to what communities need, and that think about really, really important pieces of this field that frankly we need to do better on: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thinking about using PFS as a tool to empower communities to tackle major inequities and racial disparities. Adapting interventions to what a community needs rather than imposing things top down. Those are really, really important facets of how we implement PFS in a sustainable way. So that's like the whole Pay for Success field that we're trying to grapple with in a couple minutes. Happy to take just a question or two if there's time, or if there's not, I'm glad to hear more about what you are doing. I mean, final thought. The higher ed field really is a critical point of leverage. We're following with enormous interest, interventions such as, for instance, CUNY ASAP and the really spectacular outcomes that we've seen both in New York and then in the replication most recently in Ohio. It is notable that we as of yet have not seen, a lot of governors, a number of higher ed commissioners, really champion putting public sector dollars into scaling those kind of approaches yet. You could do that with PFS. You could do that through, innovative projects that steer dollars into those services. And so one of the goals that we're going to be working with third sector and others on is how we support more states and more, community colleges to actually do that. We'd like to see more progress there, and I think this cohort is a critical framework for doing that. So Sarah, I'm so sorry if I ran over.
No, that was great. Roger, thanks for your comments and for your remarks. Hopefully folks on the line felt the connection on why we thought Roger would be a really great person to offer some remarks at this stage of the journey. I think, as HK mentioned, Roger's been a real champion of this effort and is a great thought partner. And so if there are questions, we can provide contact information afterwards, but would love to start to dive into some of those state presentations to start to hear from states who were willing to take that step and think about how to build relationships with service providers and communities. So we're going to hold each team to their 15 minutes, not to rush anyone, but just to make sure that we have the opportunity to really hear the full journey that each of the site has been able to experience over this last 6 months. I'm going to have a timer running in the background, and when it goes off, know that that's your final minute to make any final comments or answer that last question. But I'm going to actually turn it over to Cynthia to make sure that we can hear. I think that's right.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Good morning. Yes. Hi, Cynthia. You're on.
Good morning. All right. Thank you. Thank you again to Roger. That was really interesting. And we're from Colorado, of course, and so we're excited to hopefully keep in contact and learn more about the projects that occurred in Colorado. That's great to hear. But our team is part of the Colorado Department of Higher Education, specifically COSI, which is the Colorado Opportunity Scholarship Initiative. And our project, or our North Star, was really to provide those to and through wraparound support services that would be based in communities but connected to institutions. We also have the opportunity to add in COSI scholarship funds. And our population of focus is adult, low-income students of color, and we want to erase attainment gaps, increase completion, and then, of course, ultimately to improve workforce opportunities for these individuals as they're moving through. We have an amazing team who helped with the project. Lauren, who is chief of our data and research area, Kim, who's chief officer for our student academic success, Shelley is our director of COSI, and I am the program director for COSI as well. We had the opportunity at different points over these past 6 months to get this information and this project out to our board, our COSI board, and also our COSI grantees. And I think that for us really helped us to refine our population of focus, and also to get some feedback in terms of what institutions or what areas of the state may be interested in this type of work and partnering with us. With COSI currently, we serve all public institutions. We provide grant funds to all public institutions across the state. And so it was a great opportunity for us to get that initial feedback and really hone in on what areas and institutions we may want to move forward with. We also had MSUW intern, Lindsay, who focused her course project this semester on our PFS project, basically, and our student population. So we're really excited the work that she's put into that and be able to use some of those resources as we move forward. So our COSI team has also been involved at different points along the way. So we've had a lot of great feedback, and we're really excited about moving forward with this project. We've been working with this hypothesis, of course, over the last 6 months and the last meeting that we had with Sarah and HK. We were really excited because we saw very little red, and it's all around funding, I believe, and payment. So we're hoping that is one of our next steps, which we'll get into in a bit. We're hoping that we'll be able to really kind of move forward with that piece and see where we have some different opportunities. I'm ready for the next slide, please. Okay, so our cohort achievements, I put the first one as just understanding PSF. I think it took some time, especially for me, to really wrap my head around this PFS model and how these payments work, and we had a lot of questions from our grantees about, well, it seems like you're paying even though we don't meet our outcome. So how does that affect us, or do we have to pay back as a direct service providers? And so Joanna and all of the third sector team has been really supportive in offering their time outside of our working group to ensure that we understand the model really well, because I think that's just of extreme importance to be able to then share that model and what our work and our project is as we're moving forward. And I think I feel very confident, and I would say our team does as well. So I considered that an achievement for us. Also, I think that we have a pretty solid initial kind of project plan, and it's supported by our senior leadership. So that I think was the point for us of this whole kind of technical assistance and being involved in this project, is having something at the end that we can really jump into and move forward with. And so we're excited about that piece. Regarding the takeaways, I put again a clear understanding. Of course, it's similar to the achievements, but again, this is the first time that I've worked with the model, and so we're just excited to move our project forward and also begin thinking about other areas within the department or maybe at some institutions that would benefit from this type of model. Connecting with others was, the last group meeting that we had with the third sector, I think it was Sarah who suggested meeting with different organizations in Colorado that had utilized this model. And, we thought, well, geez, why didn't we think of that? That would have been a great place to start this whole work and to get a better understanding of the landscape in Colorado. So Usually that's something that you cross off your list first, but that's something that I think has been, that we'll just kind of keep in mind as we move forward to, what is the landscape, who's doing this work. So I think it's important. We don't want to overlap. We want to enhance and grow a project. So we want to just get a feel for what others are doing and to connect with them, not only in PFS, but just in working with adults in general. Also is the next one we have is community focus. And this is kind of in reference to where our program, kind of our project has currently landed. We went through a lot of different ideas on how to structure the program and talked about who or, what organization or what institution would make the most impact in reaching these students that we're focusing on. And so, we thought through our current grantees, our institutions, and we really finally landed on community organizations. So we really believe that if we focus on a community organization who may be able to provide those direct services, they're already embedded in the community. They've most likely already built some trust and relationships within the community, and they may have access to individuals that we would not, as kind of someone from the outside coming in. So we're hoping that is something that will work for our project as we move forward. And I think I'm ready for the next one. Great. So our next steps, first, and I'm not sure really that they're in order, but one of the things we need to do is, of course, finalize our location for the pilot project, and also to engage the leadership in each of those areas. So we're kind of looking at these kind of clusters, I guess, of regional areas. So for instance, Adams County is a pretty big county in the Denver metro area, and many students feed into the institutions that are closest to that county. Fort Morgan is an institution that's rural. They have several satellite campuses around the Eastern Plains that we think we would be able to partner with well. And Pueblo is one that we're looking at as well. They have Pueblo Community College, who also have some different satellite campuses. So we think that if we focus on some urban and some rural areas and institutions that may be feeder for our population of focus, that we could get some really great outcomes. The next is to determine our direct service provider. We've been talking a little bit about, would this be a process of like request for proposal, like a regular grant kind of project where which is what we currently have. We send out a request for proposal for our current student support services. The other is to really just jump into the community and start to talk to more people and asking, kind of doing, again, a review or a landscape of that community in terms of, what services or what community-based organization are individuals currently accessing, and how could we maybe build this project onto something like that. We're really fortunate. We've already had some outreach from the Pueblo Library system, and so we're hoping that could maybe be a connection for us for that area. The next, of course, is funding. That's always something, I think, probably across the board, something that we're all talking about. COSI may be a little bit unique in terms of we receive a yearly allocation for scholarships and for student support service programs. We also have a corpus of funds that are kind of in reserve right now, and so we may be able to access some of those funds for a pilot project. And then, of course, outreach to different private donors. We had a meeting recently with senior leadership, and they had some really great ideas on who we could possibly outreach to, so we're hoping to move forward with that pretty quickly. The timing is an area as well that is important for us. Again, what else may be happening in the state that is focused on our student population that we may be able to align with. And also, if we do need to request additional funds from our board, we have set meetings throughout the year, and we may need to call a special meeting for review and of that request. So we have some timing things that we need to think about. Also, if we do receive private donorship, there may be a timeline on those funds, or we may need to get started with a pilot project earlier than we maybe were anticipating. And the last piece is just program and curriculum development. We currently have a structure within COSI where we have some required activities that our grantees follow in terms of best practices, and then they develop their own programming. So it's a very flexible structure that is easily adaptable to the institution and the students of focus. So our goal is to just create some curriculum around student support systems for adults, researching other programs, and as I mentioned, aligning with COSI structure. And the questions that I have, and I think I ask this question every time, but you know, we could use some help with just some ideas if there are any current adult focused or adult promise programs that we could connect with. And then also, in your experience, what are some common challenges or issues, mistakes that organizations make in developing and launching a pilot program, or areas that, you know, are overlooked, or, you know, just not enough time or resources are allocated to some of those different areas. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for your overview and for really, you know, walking us through some of the achievements that your team has been able to accomplish throughout this TA. I think one thought that I have, just to underscore what Cynthia had mentioned, is the deep engagement they did with so many partners, including their board, throughout the process. And I think allowing that insight and those perspectives to help shape the project, I think, is evident in how far it brought your work throughout the course of this time together. We do have a minute if there's a question for Cynthia or the Team Colorado from the group. Can check chat box, or if there are any questions that folks want to ask on the line.
This is Shelley Banker. I just want to give a big shout out to Cynthia for really being our project lead and making making that hypothesis really come to life. So I know she recognized all of us, but she's the one who's really been leading the charge, and we so appreciate her.
This is Lauren. Just also add a thank you so much to the third sector team for choosing us to take part in this journey. It's been a fantastic experience for us, and we really appreciate the work that you've done.
Excellent. Well, Colorado, you all have been greatly so dedicated, and we've just appreciated everything that you've put in it. So greatly appreciate those kind words, but also definitely underscoring Shelley's shout out. Cynthia, thanks for all of your commitment and effort and understanding of a complex tool, and really coming along the journey to be able to then share what that means to others that you work with. Great. Well, we can now turn over to Team Ohio. If Ohio is able to unmute their line and then kick off their presentation.
Hi, it's Stephanie here. I'm just waiting for the next slide.
Sounds good, Stephanie.
There we go. Well, again, this is Stephanie Davidson, and I am here in this room with Brett Fisker, and I think there are some other folks on the line from other sites. But just as a reminder, we're from the Ohio Department of Higher Education, and that is the state coordinating agency for public higher education in the state. And we oversee 23 community colleges, 14 universities and their regional campuses, along with Ohio's technical centers and adult education programs. So we really have a full continuum of post-secondary education. And we've been working on this project along with partners at Results Ohio and at the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. And we've been really grateful for Zach and Lauren from Results Ohio and Amy from the Department of Job and Family Services. It's been a little bit of a journey, but what we have finally coalesced around is a goal to improve the post-secondary completion rates for recipients of Ohio's National Guard Scholarship. We have a state-funded scholarship program for our Ohio National Guard members, and it's come to our attention that the completion rates are really not very good for those scholarship recipients, and we think there's an opportunity to vastly and strategically increase those completions. Our hypothesis and vision statement, it's become more green definitely over the time that we've worked on this. Some kind of key points is we have decided, at least our working hypothesis is that we're going to work with Inside Track as our external provider, and they have a lot of experience in doing proven coaching services. So we're going to work with them to deliver coaching services to recipients of the Ohio National Guard Scholarship with the goals of increasing term-to-term persistence and credit intensity in the early times, and then ultimately increase credential completion. We believe we have access to the data that we need. We're going to use our own HEI data system, and we will be tapping into some data at the Adjutant General's office about who these scholarship recipients are. We're going to measure our outcomes based on the percentage of scholarship recipients persisting from term to term, and by average credits per term, again, getting at credit intensity. But as I mentioned earlier, really our longer term outcomes are going to be percentage of students completing technical certificates, associate degrees, and bachelor's degrees. In terms of funding, this is where Results Ohio has been very, very helpful to us. We're going to work with the Adjutant General and with Results Ohio to request an appropriation from the General Assembly. And then Results Ohio is going to identify an upfront funder to pay Inside Track and hold the funds from the General Assembly, and then in order to pay back the upfront funder. We haven't worked out the details about how much this is going to cost yet, so that's why that's still in red. We can go to the next slide. In terms of our achievements, I think a big achievement was identifying an appropriate and workable project population with a well-defined and measurable problem. And you'll see I put 3 achievements, and they kind of match with the 3 takeaways. So when we get over to the takeaways, you'll kind of see how they fit together. But we started very broadly, and it took us some time to narrow it to an appropriate place. A second achievement, I believe, was identifying an external provider. Inside Track has been a great partner to work with so far, and we're looking forward to working with them in the future because they have a lot of experience in doing this kind of coaching work, and they're willing to work with us very closely to co-design a solution to meet what we think are the problems that these scholarship recipients are experiencing. So they're going to work with us to design some coaching for pre-enrollment to make sure that the students get connected to the right career fields and the right type of institution, whether that be a technical center or a community college or a university, and then also work with us on a cost structure that will end up being workable in the end. And the third achievement is building the relationship with our partners here in Ohio, so between us and Results Ohio and OGJFS, and then of course nationally building the relationships with the folks at Third Sector, the folks we met at NCAN, the network of providers that we've been introduced to, and of course our other cohort states and institutions. In terms of our takeaways, I think we learned a lot about narrowly defining the population. Over the course of the project, we moved from wanting to serve adults generally, which we know is a huge need in Ohio. We realized, though, that we needed to narrow it. We narrowed it to veterans, and then we even further narrowed it to National Guard recipients. And I think during that process, it's really helped us wrap our arms around a specific population and a specific project that we think would be a good start to us learning about how to use these Pay for Success projects. Another takeaway that I think we've come to grips with over the course of the past 6 months is that originally when we were starting to think about this, when we think about improving outcomes for students, we often think about what types of system change need to happen within our institutions in order to give better outcomes for students. And that's huge when you try and wrap your arms around that and try and develop an initial pay for success project. So I think we came to grips and said, no, we're going to use more of a standard pay for success project, link up with an external provider to help with this very specific issue, realizing that we're not going to solve all the internal problems of an institution, but that we can probably make really significant improvements for student outcomes. So again, I think we're comfortable with starting here. We still really think that pay for success can be used for big systems change within institutions, but I think we're comfortable starting with a little bit smaller project in the beginning. And then I think the other takeaway is we're really lucky to have an entity like Results Ohio here in the state. This is a new agency that's been set up within the Treasurer's Office specifically to help other agencies, local and state, understand pay for success and set up pay for success projects. And that's been extremely helpful to us. We're counting on them to help with the economics and the financing work streams. We're counting on them to help identify the upfront funders. That's what they're being set up to do and can do for us. And then it's just really helpful politically moving forward because the state has already recognized at the highest levels that pay for success models are something that are worth investigating and worth doing. So when we go to the General Assembly for money, they're going to be a little bit more in tune with what these projects are and why it would be a good idea. Next slide. Our next steps, I've kind of grouped them into 3 different areas: student population, data access, and student support services. Because we came to the National Guard Scholarship population a little bit late, we haven't had as much interaction with our Adjutant General's office and with members. We have a military strategic implementation team across our campuses. So we need to meet more with them to discuss the data access, get a better feel for how many students we want to serve, what sort of institutions should we be looking to for participation, and to further illuminate the root causes of the scholarship recipients' lack of success. Then once we have that information, we can continue our meetings with Inside Track to co-design the particular student support options that we think are going to be beneficial and to evaluate the cost. In terms of our outcomes measurements, we have a good idea that we want to look at persistence, credit accumulation, and completion, but we really want to meet with some academic researchers to fine-tune those metrics because we know they're going to be really important in determining how and when to pay. And then we also have to identify a program evaluator. We have a number of research entities in our higher ed institutions across the state who do this, but we would really need to pick one to do that for us. And then project funding, economics, and policy support. We need, with Results Ohio, to work through the economic model and term sheet tools to determine the necessary budget and payment schedules for the project. We need to coordinate with the Governor's Office and Results Ohio and the Adjutant General to obtain budget support. As I said, we are planning to go to the General Assembly to ask for an appropriation. So we need to do that with a united front. We think we have the people in place to do that. And then Results Ohio is going to take the lead for us in identifying the private investor. And in terms of things that the cohort can help us with, I think we have just found a lot of value in working with the group, hearing the issues that you're working through, the kinds of solutions that you've come up with. So I think continued connections to those, both within our cohort and across the country, to those investigating and implementing PFS projects, particular to higher education, would be valuable to us. I think that's it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Brett's shaking his head.
Yeah, no,
he doesn't
no
need to add anything.
I know it. No, you did a great job.
Well, Stephanie, I echo Brett's comments. You spoke very well about the project, and I think one of the takeaways I have is just how collaborative your whole group has been, and especially trusting the process, but also being willing to go back and adjust, so that, as you mentioned, you could find the right population for the right kind of problem that you were hoping to solve for. We have a couple minutes if there are any questions that folks have for Team Ohio, either through the chat box or through the line.
Stephanie and I had multiple conversations about trusting the process. We're like, where are we going? What is it? It was we have to trust the process, and we kept reminding each other of that from time to time, and it helped.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. I guess just to circle back on that last point, Stephanie, being able to continue to connect with the cohort is one of the aims we had by establishing this learning community. So as you and then as Colorado continue to move forward on your projects, being able to share out any takeaways or lessons learned, I think for this learning community of folks will be of great value and importance as we continue, shaping the way that this can really exist in our field and in the space. Thanks again. We're going to shift now to Arizona State University. So if Anita's on the line and able to unmute, I'll turn the mic over to you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. I had to unmute my phone and unmute the screen. So
no worries. You're on.
All right, great. Well, we're Arizona State University, and our project will aim to increase the recruitment and enrollment of foster youth in Arizona to post-secondary institutions, which we believe will ultimately help them to transition out of the foster care system. We chose this specific student population because it's a population that has the potential to see great gains in post-secondary achievement. We believe this will obviously have positive effects on their personal life, but we also want folks to see the economic benefits to the state. Because unlike Ohio, we don't have a lot of state support for education in Arizona, so that's a challenge that we continue to grapple with. But specifically our project hypothesis, we'll continue partnering with and scale the efforts of First Star Academy to deliver college access preparation. And also, in addition to that, because we know that getting them to college is only one piece, but this particular student population has a lot of other needs. So we want to work with experts in the field to provide additional wraparound support for approximately 150 foster youth who are coming to post-secondary institutions. And we chose 150 because there are approximately 800 foster youth who age out of the system every year. And many of them, half of them are homeless by the time they're 21. So that our hope is with giving them the tools of higher education, we will reduce some of those numbers. In order to demonstrate our outcomes, we'll look at post-secondary enrollment, retention, and graduation data from the information from the Department of Child Safety, and also get that enrollment, retention, and graduation data from the National Student Clearinghouse, which we already work with. Our outcomes, because of the process with students, may be measured over 8 to 10 years after services, and we're still working on our evaluation methodology. We're estimating project costs to be around $870,000 per year. We looked at current costs per student at First Star, adding additional services and then increasing the number to 150. So we got to $870,000. And we're looking for an agency to pay that amount in outcomes payment for on-track high school graduation or equivalency, completion of admissions applications to post-secondary, completion of the FAFSA, and enrollment. So there's a lot of steps along the way, but that's what we hope to do in a nutshell. Can you get to the next slide? In terms of our achievements, we really do believe, again, like I said, this is a cohort of students that can truly be impacted by the success because of their personal circumstances and also the benefits to the state. And throughout the process has been a very important process for us. We've been able to identify some key outcomes, recognizing that 70% of foster youth in Arizona aspire to attend post-secondary education, but less than 20% of them actually enroll. So we really aim to reduce the barriers that exist so that we can close that gap and get more foster care youth in higher education. Another real huge benefit for us is that we've been able to make stronger connections with other ASU areas that are in this space serving foster youth. We actually have just this week had a meeting with a number of different people around the table at ASU, and together we're looking at being more coordinated in how we serve foster youth here at ASU, obviously before they get here and through their success here at ASU. So that's been really exciting to see, just the momentum around serving foster youth at ASU. So I really do think that the time is right, and our program in particular is the pre-college program, as we're aiming to work with the high school students and then continue that continuum of services once they get here to help them be successful, I think is really key and for our project. So we've also partnered with or come to know some outside agencies in this space as well, which I think is really important because, as I mentioned previously, there's a lot of wraparound services that foster youth need, and we're not experts in that, so we really need to work with those who are experts. In terms of our takeaways, really just in general, learning about the concept of pay for success and how it works, and just really kind of grappling with that throughout the process has been great learning opportunity for us. And as we were talking with stakeholders and just having those conversations, I think there's interest in the model, and so we'll continue to build on that. You know, we also learned tremendously from feedback throughout the process, both through our meetings with Sarah as well as from the larger cohort with our pitch practice, and you know, just understanding how we can better refine our pitch is very helpful. And just looking at how we approach funding opportunities, this process, I'll kind of combine the last two, but this process really allowed us the time to think through a project, which is not something that we do typically a lot of here at ASU because we move so fast. We move at the speed of light, and really taking the time with the intentionality of the homework assignments and the meetings, the work group meetings with Sarah and other folks at Third Sector has been really helpful to us to refine our population, to just refine our project overall and think through the stakeholders. That was another key important part for us, as well as sometimes we try to think that we have to do everything ourselves, and I think this has allowed us to take a step back and say, hey, look, there are so many other people serving foster youth at ASU and in the community, and how can we best collaborate with them to have a really solid project that will yield the outcomes that we really want to see for this population in Arizona. You can go to the next slide. In terms of our next steps, we would like to continue to work with our stakeholders and potential partners just to kind of bring awareness of the project and look at how we can further refine it to be more appealing to potential funders. As was noted in our project hypothesis, we still need to hone in on our evaluation methodology, and we also need to look at our potential system level payers. That's always an important part of the project. We have some thoughts in our heads about what this will look like, but I think we need to refine it further with an outline, and then just really look in detail at what a budget looks like. Like I said, we have round numbers, but really putting some meat to that budget, I think, is key. It was really helpful last session we had with the group. We got some leads on an organization that serves foster youth, and additional leads on anybody that you know nationally or in Arizona that serves foster youth. We're interested in learning and working with other agencies. And, you know, like most folks, we need assistance with insights on potential funding. That will also help tremendously as well.
Great.
Anything else?
No, Anita, you covered everything. One of the things I've been so impressed by Team ASU is constantly going back to your charter and making sure that students were really at the center of your work, and that you were consistently thinking about how to augment projects you were already engaged in and involved in through this process. So I think you talking about all of the ways you use data and build partnerships to better support and further support the work you were engaged in was such a great thing to witness on this side of the table, or this side of the phone. I'm not sure if others from ASU have any comments, or if we do have a couple minutes if folks wanted to chime in with questions.
Is Lorenzo on the line?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I think you know, the only thing that I will add is that, you know, I'll thank part of the team here, Sylvia Simons, who serves as our associate vice president, who really kind of brought this project to us and you know, encouraged us to think about, you know, this new funding strategy or funding source as a potential way to impact our work, and how we can be a little bit more intentional with how we're partnering with our community partners, and how we're really engaging our stakeholders to invest in the work that we're doing. And, you know, Anita, who has played an instrumental and a really critical role in kind of helping us to think about, you know, what are our assets here at ASU, how are we engaging with our already existing partners, and Gabby Jimenez, who serves as our project director right now for our First Star Academy, which is, you know, what we're calling kind of our pilot of this PFS program. You know, I think that there's tremendous impact that we've already made on a small scale with, you know, this very important population of students, you know, and I think that this PFS project allows for us to kind of scale this, you know, albeit, you know, 150 may seem like a small number, but that's really impactful when you look at the number of students who, you know, age out of the foster care system every year, and then ultimately, you know, have nowhere to kind of go and have no guidance. So kudos to the team, and kudos to the PFS team that, you know, helped to guide us through this, and always kind of brought it back to our North Star and guided us through the process.
Awesome. Thanks for those additional thoughts, Lorenzo. We've loved working with the team. I think the chat box is sharing some love with all of our first three groups so far. But if there are no other questions or comments from ASU, we can turn to Connecticut. Excellent. Ben, are you on the line and able to be in?
Yep, I'm here.
Excellent. We can hear you. I'll turn to your slide and kick it over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, first of all, I'd like to join my colleagues from other states in thanking the folks from Third Sector for all your help and guidance on this process. We certainly appreciated it. Let's see, remind myself where I am here. Just a reminder, CSCU is a statewide system of community colleges and 4 regional universities. We also have one small online institution, Charter Oak State College. But we're in the process right now consolidating our 12 community colleges into one accredited institution. So we're kind of doing this against a backdrop of pretty staggering changes organizationally within our system that are happening between a year ago or 2 years ago and 2 years into the future. However, we are very interested in the concept of PFS, and we're very happy to try to think about how we might bring it to bear to solve some of our most pressing concerns. So while we are in the middle of this sort of administrative change around how we provide, back office support and financial services and other things to the community college system, we're also very mindful of the shortcomings that we have in our current system with respect to the outcomes for underrepresented minority students in general, and in some geographic areas in particular. One of those is the town of Willimantic, which is a small sort of old mill city, small town really, but it's got a little urban core in eastern Connecticut, which has, eastern Connecticut is not a particularly diverse area of the state generally, but Willimantic is and has a very large Latinx community. However, Quinnebog Community College, which is nearby, has seen significant declines in the numbers of minority students who attend, and are, the rate at which we matriculate Latinx high school graduates from the region at Quinnebog has dropped quite a bit over the last few years, and we thought that trying to turn around that decline was a good sample project for us to explore pay for success. So our vision statement is that we, in collaboration with Eastern Connecticut State University and Quinnebog Valley Community College, they're located close to one another, may reopen the Willimantic Center to work with service providers to deliver support services, wraparound supports, childcare, sense of belonging, et cetera, to 1 to 300 underrepresented minority students. We're trying to drive an increase in rates of college enrollment, attendance, and student success. In order to demonstrate outcomes, we're going to use P20 WIN data. That's a state program that combines data from the state K-12 education systems, the Department of Labor, and CSCU, as well as just enrollment data. Outcomes will be measured by enrollment levels and students earning 15 or more credits in the first year, as well as fall to spring persistence. We've recently established a whole series of key performance indicators that we're tracking by college and by population groups. And many of them are what we see as sort of early momentum indicators, early indicators of which are likely to result in better completion and other outcomes. So we would rely on those. Our evaluation methodology is sort of to be determined as our project costs. We have the ability to hold funds authorized by the Board of Regents to pay for outcome payments. So we do have sort of, unlike some public systems, I think we probably are, the way we're set up, it would be relatively easy for us to set aside funds for payment of outcome payments in a future time period. I don't know how to advance the slide. I think you have to do it. Thank you. So what have our achievements been? Well, compared to some of my colleagues in other states, I feel as though our achievements have not been as strong. You all have done fantastic jobs with your projects and have moved them very far. However, we have certainly developed a detailed understanding of pay for success. We've spent a lot of time with the financial model and with the understanding the approach, and I think we have a pretty good understanding of that. We have certainly learned a lot about some of the interventions that are being implemented in other colleges and universities around the country, and have found that to be inspiring. And I think I'm hopeful that some of the experience and some of the examples that I've been exposed to here we can bring them to bear on making our college system improve going forward. And lastly, we had some pretty successful engagement with stakeholders and developed an appreciation of their local concerns, which because of the sort of structured effort to get the stakeholders together and see what they thought, we actually found that our entire thinking about what we ought to do and what kind of direction we ought to take to address the concerns of Latinx enrollment at Quinebaug Valley really were not what the local stakeholders wanted, and they sort of redirected us. The local stakeholders, clearly their priority, and they have strong support for reestablishment of this thing called the Willimantic Center, which is a sort of an outpost of the community college located in the middle of the town. The Quinebaug Valley is actually located about 20 miles outside of the little urban core of Willimantic, and transportation in that rural part of the state is a significant problem. There's not good public transportation. It's getting a little better. It's not good, and so that's been a real issue. However, one thing that I did not know but learned from the stakeholder engagement was that local stakeholders had the perception that or voiced what they saw amongst the community that they represented and worked within, that there had been changes at Quinebaug Valley, particularly the closure of the Willimantic Center 5 or 6 years ago, that have produced a sense of unwelcomeness for Latinx students at Quinebaug Valley. There were a number of people who expressed that they had students that they'd worked with who'd gone there and felt isolated and unwelcome, that they did not have a sense of comfort in attending that school, which obviously is a problem. If we're going to try and serve this population, they need to feel welcome there. And that the closure of the Willimantic Center had left a very bad taste in people's mouths, and I think informed some of that sense of unwelcome. And so they felt very strongly that reestablishment of the Willimantic Center was the best way to overcome some of these perceptions about whether the school was really in the business of serving the needs of the Latinx community in that area. In addition, another takeaway that we got is that we felt very comfortable with using the Pay for Success model to support agreements intended to increase enrollment of defined cohorts of prospective students. One is the data problems are a little simpler when one of the basic outcomes is enrollment. Like we want to find a way to get back to historical levels of participation from Latinx students in the Wyndham Willimantic school system. We think that if they come, they will bring tuition or Pell or whatever financial aid that they will bring to the table, and that does ultimately give us resources to pay for the efforts to bring them in. So we thought that there was a real it was a good fit. It also works with us. We're a heavily unionized work environment, and we have Connecticut has among the most pro-worker labor laws for public employees. So it would be very difficult under our current collective bargaining agreements to enter into a contract for provision of services that are currently being provided by our unionized faculty. So we really had to sort of work around that in thinking about this. And again, that gets to why we are focusing our efforts on interventions intended to bring more, to work with high school students and to work with community groups to get a higher interest among those groups in coming to Quinebaug Valley. Obviously, creating a hospitable and welcoming environment at Quinebaug Valley is key to that, and we think the Willimantic Center can be of the location at which this type of work can occur. And lastly, I think one of our takeaways is that we, there's some discipline around that PFS brings to bear around the use of data in determining vendor performance, which even outside of a strict pay for success model, I think we've learned some things that we will try to bring to bear on a whole host of our contracting, more traditional types of contracting activities that we have. There's some features of those contracts that we like very much, even if we're not using some of the, working capital seeding and deferred payments that are part of a true pay for success contract. Next slide, please. So our next steps are, we're working on a site. I mean, part of the problems with having one of the price of entry for the stakeholders is the reestablishment of this Willimantic Center is we have to go and deal with real estate and lining up funding to acquire real estate. We have a pretty good idea of where we can go, and we're working through the complexities of bringing that, of acquiring that piece of property now. At the same time, we are beginning to work with, since we've sort of changed direction from what kind of services can we be providing to augment participation within this population to how are we going to use this essentially sort of community asset to enhance the enrollment. We're going back to our stakeholders to develop operation staffing and curriculum plans for this Willimantic Center. So and using that, we will be able to. So that has to happen now, and we're beginning that process. We're also, so we're then, what we see as the PFS portion of this project is then going to be for an organization to assist us with the parts of the Willimantic Center's operation that are focused on recruitment and preparation of underserved groups. One of the things that the stakeholders told us was that we're obviously an open access institution as a community college. There's a whole series of tests that need to be taken initially to place into various levels in different areas, and that the Latinx community has found that testing process to be onerous and too often results in Latinx students being placed in such significant amounts of remediation that they don't feel like they're making any progress and they are unlikely to persist. So we think that there's a whole bunch of work that can be done in the year before students come, working with high school seniors and in the summer before they come to college, to get them to do some real preparation to help them get into do better on the placement exams and be more successful as a result. So those are our next steps. In terms of the things that the cohort can help us with, I mean, we have not identified potential partners yet. I think it's premature given the need for us to establish this new home. But we will be, I think, at that point in the coming year. And so I'm looking forward to having the cohort help us with the identification of potential partners. And obviously, the contracting piece of this, I think that having the experience of colleagues in other states and the help of folks from third sector is going to be invaluable in getting the kinds of agreements in place that we need.
Awesome.
So that's what I got.
Thanks so much, Ben. Really appreciate all of the things that you offered in your presentation. And one of my reflections is just the focus on equity that Connecticut has had throughout this process of really first looking to data and helping you all identify where to turn your project. And then, of course, you mentioned the invaluable reflections and perspectives you got from some of the stakeholder engagement. And I think that those things combined are part of, the third sector process that we value very much. And I think you've come along that journey. And I think all of the highlights and takeaways you shared are good fruits of that effort. I think, as hopefully everyone heard on the line, we're just so thrilled with what every single site was able to achieve during their time in the cohort. As you heard, each team really achieved quite a bit, both in terms of how they wanted to advance a Pay for Success project, but also in strengthening stakeholder relationships across the state, finding dedicated working time to consider how they might effectively reach populations disproportionately experiencing negative outcomes. And I think keeping students at the center of this work throughout has been something that every single person on each of the site teams has really championed. And third sector is just very grateful for all of the time and effort everyone put into this time that we've shared. So there's a couple other audiences that we have talked about at the beginning. So we shared, at the beginning of this time together that our initial goal was to assess Pay for Success by collaborating not only with state government and higher education agencies, but also access and success providers, as well as potential upfront funders. So now we'd like to take a little time to provide some high-level takeaways to some of that engagement that we've done across the cohort. So as folks know, and several of them are on the call today, our provider advisory group has joined us on this journey, and they are made up of Catholic Charities Fort Worth, College Forward, College Possible, Equity, Educate Tomorrow, Inside Track, 1 Million Degrees, and You Aspire. And they joined us to consider what they may need to participate in Pay for Success projects. And we are also so grateful to the time that they have put into not only attending some of these learning opportunities, but collaborating with the states and systems throughout this process. But we should note that their involvement has been similarly a part of a much longer journey, which started back in May 2019, where we had that request for information release. We had 37 different providers respond to that request for information and landscape those responses to better understand the landscape of college access and success providers. From that RFI, we made that selection of the 8 providers that I just talked to participate in our provider advisory group. We conducted one-on-one calls with each of them to better understand their program models and understand and make an assessment of their readiness for Pay for Success. And right now we're in the process of finalizing those to schedule some debrief time in January to offer next steps to those sites as well. So what did we learn in that process? As part of our landscape, we learned a great deal about the kinds of student support services that exist in the space, and we feel we received pretty strong representation, though by no means was it exhaustive. But we did get a good insight into what kinds of student support services exist, from mentoring to coaching to non-financial supports, and across different kinds of jurisdictions and geographies as well. And so the insight from the providers to that RFI not only helped our state and site teams complete an initial root cause analysis of some attributes of services they may look to, but also then were a way to prepare them for the time at NCAN. So really valuable learning opportunity there. Then, as I mentioned, we conducted some one-on-one calls with our provider advisory group, and providers were assessed on their readiness across the same 6 feasibility criteria areas that our state and systems use throughout the technical assistance. So you can see there in the right column, the high pay for success readiness is how third sector typically assesses not whether a project model or a service model is good or not, but how ready it is for a pay for success contracting arrangement. And so that was really where we focused our time and conversations with the providers in the provider advisory group. And we learned some really important takeaways, but I'm happy to share some of those high level takeaways with the cohort today. So by and large, college access and success providers are delivering really effective services to address the outcomes for students experiencing disparities. We found some uniformity in the readiness for pay for success, specifically due to their focus on under-resourced student populations that are very targeted by nature, the fact that they're using evidence-informed service models that have scaled either in partnership with institutions or in some cases to other jurisdictions. And additionally, all providers in the group are actively tracking and measuring clearly defined higher education outcomes, but also have an appetite and interest in collecting data beyond a student's path to and through college. So I think that those factors, as well as their capacity and interest in building partnerships with institutions and states that are committed to better supporting students, is really indicative of that readiness in this space. But the largest barriers really stem from the lack of formalized relationships with government and institutions of higher ed. And so some of those barriers include, in some cases, a lack of targeted or formalized referral pathways. And so for those providers that do have arrangements with institutions to support the identification of students, that is really more enabling of a pay for success arrangement. Providers have varied access to data. So those providers with more formal data sharing arrangements or agreements are more promising for a pay for success mechanism. And some providers have very formal partnerships with HEIs, and some are contracting with directly institutions or are funded by institutions, but the variability in the field still presents a gap. We do see, though, a few opportunities for states and systems to partner with these providers in order to strengthen their readiness, as you may have identified in some of the barriers I reviewed. So some of those recommendations are to organize a more coordinated referral network from community to campus, and identifying the right kinds of students to participate in those effective services. To collaborate in more formal data sharing agreements so that college access and success providers have the opportunity to share in the continuous learning that can come from looking at data more regularly. And finally, to leverage all of the great evaluation that's been done in partnership with these providers as one way to better understand possible financial and social return on investment. I'd say that most providers are really excited about this and want that information too, and so coming together to identify those opportunities can be promising for the field and, of course, for the students at the center of the work. And then I'll share on this slide, we've also been analyzing funder interest for outcomes-focused higher ed work, and we've been interviewing a funder network and engaging with a funder network that most of the partners on this slide may look familiar to many of you on the call, but we've been gauging their interest in this work too. And from those conversations, there definitely is interest in supporting pay for success in higher ed initiatives. We've heard a few really great information from those funders, and I'll share a few of those early takeaways with you. The first is that upfront funders love to get involved in projects when the ideas are mostly baked, when you have a pretty solid idea of what you want to do, but there's still some opportunity to weigh in or adjust the model. The second is that, the funders that we've talked to have stated that the providers who embrace data, who really are high capacity and often are talking to data and wanting to learn from data as a way to really validate their outcomes, those are the types of providers that upfront funders are most excited to work with in pay for success projects, especially because the information you learn can not always be exactly what you thought it was going to be. And so that data literacy, I think, is very important to them. And then finally, as part of an upfront funder's due diligence, Typically, funders are looking to confirm a depth of commitment or a bench of folks that are really invested in the project, both on the provider side, but also on the state and system side as well. And one of the comments I remember is, if it's just one champion on the provider side or one champion at the state that's really trying to bring this project together and they leave, what happens? And so really looking to see that there's that bench across and really that the value and commitment across all partners involved. So those are some of the takeaways that we have from that work, and we'll be synthesizing and analyzing more of that to share in a more formal follow-up with the rest of our landscape in January. I'm gonna make sure that, I know we're coming up on our time. I just want to underscore again how excited we are to have heard from everyone on the call today, and also just to have been joined by so many great thought partners in the field, people who are excited about this work, who want to think outside the box, who want to tackle big problems and that are facing our students in higher ed. And do so with an energy that I've just been so impressed by. So thank you to every partner who's participated in this. And we'll be sure to keep everyone connected in the time to come. There seems to be an interest in continuing the discussion across this space. I don't know if there were any final remarks or any final questions that folks had. Well, if not, thanks again. Thanks to our presenters, and we'll be in touch with all of the final resources from the training and technical assistance. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.